The dusty stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the small station in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and Nora Langley clutched her worn carpetbag with trembling fingers, wondering if the man waiting for her would see through her secret before the sun set on this September day in 1872. She had traveled nearly 800 miles from Pennsylvania, answering an advertisement that promised a decent home and an honest man who needed a wife. The letter she had received in response had been kind and straightforward, describing a cattle ranch 20 miles outside of town and a life that would be simple but comfortable. Nora had memorized every word of that letter because her friend Margaret had read it to her 6 times. She had composed her own response in her mind, speaking the words aloud while Margaret's pen scratched across the paper, careful not to reveal the shame that had followed her since childhood, that at 22 years old, she had never learned to read or write. The stage driver helped her down, and Nora smoothed her best dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days but was still respectable. Her dark hair was pinned neatly beneath her bonnet, and her gray eyes scanned the handful of people waiting by the station. Miss Langley. She turned toward the voice and found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of coffee. He held his hat in his hands, revealing brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and a face that, while not classically handsome, held an honest quality that immediately put her at ease. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Thorne." "Jacob Thorne, yes, madam." He offered a slight smile. "Welcome to Council Bluffs. I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, accepting his hand as he helped her onto the wooden walkway. His grip was firm but gentle, calloused from ranch work. "But I am grateful to have arrived safely." "I have a wagon just over here," Jacob said, gesturing toward a sturdy vehicle hitched to 2 horses. "It will take us a few hours to reach the ranch. I brought some food and water for the trip. Thought you might be hungry." Nora felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. The journey had been exhausting, with little time for proper meals. As they walked toward the wagon, she studied him from the corner of her eye. He moved with quiet confidence, not the swagger she had seen in some men, but the steady assurance of someone comfortable in his own skin. Jacob loaded her bag into the back of the wagon and helped her onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. As they rolled out of town, heading west into the golden afternoon light, he kept up a gentle stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. "I have about 300 head of cattle right now," he explained. "My foreman, Tom, and 3 ranch hands help with the work. The house is not fancy, but it is solid. My father built it 15 years ago when he first came out here. He and my mother passed from fever 5 years back, left the place to me." "I am sorry for your loss," Nora said softly. "Thank you. They were good people, would have liked you, I think." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I should be honest with you, Miss Langley. I am not much for pretty words or fancy gestures. I work hard, sun up to sundown most days. I can promise you respect and a roof over your head, and I will do my best to be a good husband. But ranch life is not easy, especially for a woman used to city living." "I am not from the city," Nora said quietly. "I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. My father worked the land until he died when I was 16. My mother passed 2 years later, and I have been working as a seamstress since then, living in a boarding house. I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Thorne." "Jacob," he corrected gently. "If we are to be married, you should call me Jacob. Then you must call me Nora." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking and the horses' hooves providing a steady rhythm. The landscape stretched out around them, rolling prairie grass dotted with occasional stands of cottonwood trees. The sky was impossibly wide, bigger than anything Nora had seen in Pennsylvania. "Can I ask you something?" Jacob said after a time, of course. "Your letters, they were different from the others I received. More thoughtful, more honest. What made you answer my advertisement?" Nora felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. The letters. Margaret had written them based on what Nora told her, but how could she explain that now? She decided on a version of the truth. "I wanted a fresh start, a chance at a different life." "Your advertisement seemed genuine, like it came from a good man." "I hope I can live up to that," Jacob said with a slight smile. "I will admit, I was nervous about this whole arrangement. Seems strange to marry someone you have never met. But my foreman Tom, he met his wife this way 5 years ago and they are happy as can be. He said it was worth the leap of faith." "Are you a religious man?" Nora asked. "I believe in God, if that is what you are asking. My mother made sure I knew my Bible." "I do not get to church much, living so far from town, but I try to live right." "What about you?" "The same," Nora said. "My mother taught me that faith is more about how you treat people than how often you sit in a pew." Jacob nodded approvingly. "Sounds like we will get along just fine." As the sun began to sink lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they crested a small rise and Jacob pointed ahead. "There she is, Thorne Ranch." Nora looked out across the valley below and saw a sturdy 2-story house with a wraparound porch, flanked by a large barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see a few men working near the barn. "It is lovely," she said honestly. There was something solid and real about the place, something that spoke of permanence and home. "It will be yours too, soon as we say our vows," Jacob said. "The circuit preacher is due through here in 3 days. I thought that would give you some time to settle in, make sure you still want to go through with this. You will have your own room until then, of course." Nora appreciated his consideration more than he could know. As they descended into the valley and approached the house, she saw a woman emerge onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "That is Mary, Tom's wife," Jacob explained. "She has been helping keep the house in order and agreed to stay on to help you adjust. She is a good woman, kind-hearted." The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house and Mary hurried down the steps, her round face beaming with welcome. She appeared to be in her 30s, with sandy blonde hair and warm brown eyes. "You must be Nora," Mary said, reaching up to help her down from the wagon. "Welcome, dear. You must be exhausted from your travels. Come inside. I have supper ready and a room all prepared for you." The genuine warmth in Mary's voice brought tears to Nora's eyes. She had been so worried about what kind of reception she would receive, whether Jacob would be cruel or his household unfriendly. Instead, she found herself swept into the comfortable farmhouse, where the smell of fresh bread and stew filled the air. The main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace at one end, a dining table that could seat 10, and comfortable furniture arranged near the hearth. Everything was clean and well-maintained, if somewhat sparse in decoration. "Let me show you to your room," Mary said, guiding Nora up the wooden staircase. "Jacob wanted you to have the best room, the one that gets the morning sun. His room is at the other end of the hall, so you will have privacy." The room was indeed bright and pleasant, with a sturdy bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser with a wash basin, and a rocking chair by the window. It was simple but comfortable, and more than Nora had dared hope for. "Thank you," Nora said, setting down her carpet bag. "Everyone has been so kind. Jacob is a good man," Mary said with an understanding smile. "I know this must all seem strange, marrying someone you just met, but I was a mail-order bride too, and Tom turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Give it time. Let yourselves get to know each other. I think you will find you made the right choice." Nora nodded, hoping desperately that Mary was right. Dinner that evening was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Tom, the foreman, was a stocky man with a gray, streaked beard and laugh lines around his eyes. The three ranch hands, young men named Peter, Samuel, and George, were respectful and friendly, welcoming her to the ranch with genuine warmth. Jacob sat at the head of the table, and Nora found herself seated to his right, very much in the position a wife would occupy. The conversation flowed easily, talk of cattle and weather and the upcoming winter preparations. Nora listened carefully, learning the rhythm of ranch life through their words. When Mary asked her about Pennsylvania, she shared stories of her childhood on the farm, the seasons and the work she remembered from before her father died. After dinner, Jacob offered to show her around the property before the light faded completely. They walked together toward the barn, the evening air cool and pleasant after the heat of the day. "The ranch keeps me busy," Jacob said as they walked, "but I want you to know I will make time for you. A marriage is more than just sharing a house. I want us to be partners, Nora. I want you to be happy here." "I want that too," she said softly. "Jacob, there is something I need to tell you." He stopped and turned to face her, his expression open and patient. "What is it?" Nora took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had to tell him now, before the wedding. It would not be fair to deceive him. "My letters to you, the ones I sent in response to your advertisement, they were not entirely honest." Jacob's brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," her voice caught, and she had to force herself to continue. "I cannot read, Jacob. I never learned. My friend Margaret, she read your letters to me and wrote down my responses. Everything I said was true, but I did not write the words myself. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you would not want me if you knew." The silence that followed felt eternal. Nora could not bring herself to meet his eyes, certain she would see disappointment or anger there. Perhaps he would send her back to Pennsylvania, and she would not blame him. What kind of wife could not even read a simple letter? "Look at me," Jacob said gently, slowly. Nora raised her eyes to his face. To her surprise, she saw neither anger nor disappointment. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, perhaps a bit sad. "Why did you never learn?" he asked. "My mother tried to teach me when I was young, but I could not make sense of the letters. They seemed to jump around on the page and I would get them mixed up. She said I was not trying hard enough, but I was trying. I truly was. After my father died, there was no time for lessons anymore, and later I was too ashamed to admit I could not read. I learned to hide it, to get by without anyone knowing." Jacob was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then I will teach you." Nora blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I will teach you to read," Jacob repeated. "My mother was a teacher back in Ohio before she married my father. She made sure I knew my letters and numbers, and she always said reading was one of life's greatest gifts. If you want to learn, I will teach you. You would do that?" Nora's voice trembled with emotion. "Of course I would. Nora, everyone has things they struggle with. That does not make you less worthy or less capable. It just means you need help, and I am offering it." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I asked you to come here because I thought we might build a good life together. This does not change that." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks before she could stop them. All the shame and fear she had carried for so long seemed to crack open, and for the first time she felt the possibility of something different. "Thank you," she whispered. "No need for thanks," Jacob said, squeezing her hand gently. "We are going to be family. We help each other. That is how this works." They continued their walk, and Jacob showed her the barn where the horses were stabled, the chicken coop where the hens were settling in for the night, and the smokehouse where meat was cured. Everything was orderly and well-maintained, evidence of Jacob's careful stewardship. As darkness fell and they walked back toward the house, Nora felt something she had not felt in years: hope. Maybe this strange arrangement, this leap of faith into the unknown, would turn out to be exactly what she needed. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Mary helped Nora settle into the household routines, teaching her where things were kept and how Jacob liked things done. Nora proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker, rising early to help with breakfast and spending the days cleaning, mending, and preparing meals. Jacob was often out working with the cattle, but he made time each evening to sit with Nora on the porch, talking about the day and getting to know each other better. She learned that he loved horses and had a talent for training them, that he had fought briefly in the Civil War when he was just 18, and that he dreamed of eventually expanding the ranch to be one of the largest in the county. He learned that she had a gift for sewing and needlework, that she loved the sound of rain on a roof, and that she had always wanted to see the ocean but never had the chance. These conversations felt natural and comfortable, and Nora found herself looking forward to them each day. On the third evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, the circuit preacher arrived. Reverend James Caldwell was a lean man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He had dinner with them and then spoke privately with Jacob and Nora together, asking if they were certain about their decision to marry. "Marriage is a sacred bond," he said, his voice serious. "It should not be entered into lightly. You barely know each other. Are you both prepared to commit to this union before God?" Jacob looked at Nora and she looked back at him. Despite the short time they had known each other, she felt a certainty settling in her chest. This man was honest and kind, hardworking and decent. She could build a life with him. "I am prepared," she said. "As am I," Jacob added. The wedding took place the next morning in the main room of the house with Mary, Tom, and the ranch hands as witnesses. Nora wore a simple dress that Mary had helped her alter, and Jacob wore his best shirt and vest. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob leaned down and kissed her gently on the forehead. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Thorne," he said with a warm smile. Mary had prepared a special meal to celebrate, and there was even a small cake that she had baked the night before. The ranch hands offered their congratulations, and Tom made a toast to the new couple's happiness. It was simple and unpretentious, but Nora felt genuinely welcomed and celebrated. That night, Jacob knocked softly on Nora's door. She opened it to find him standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I know we are married now," he said, "but I do not want to rush anything. We can take our time getting comfortable with each other. I will sleep in my own room until you are ready for things to change." Nora felt a rush of affection for this considerate man. "Thank you, Jacob. That means a great deal to me." He nodded and turned to go, then paused. "Tomorrow evening, if you would like, we can start your reading lessons. I found my mother's old primers in the attic. They are a bit worn, but they should serve well enough." "I would like that very much," Nora said. The next evening, after the dinner dishes were cleared, Jacob sat up at the dining table with a slate, chalk, and one of his mother's old books. Nora sat beside him, her stomach fluttering with nervousness. "We will start with the alphabet," Jacob said. "Do you know your letters at all?" "Some of them," Nora admitted. "I can recognize a few, but I get confused easily." "That is all right. We will go slow." He drew a large letter on the slate. "This is A. It makes the sound ah like an apple." They worked through the alphabet, with Jacob patiently writing each letter and helping Nora practice drawing them herself. His teaching style was gentle and encouraging, never making her feel foolish when she confused letters or forgot sounds. "You are doing well," he said after an hour. "This takes time, but you are learning." "How do you have so much patience?" Nora asked. "I feel like I am moving so slowly." "My mother used to say that everyone learns at their own pace and the only failure is in giving up." He smiled at her. "Besides, I enjoy teaching you. It gives us time together." As the weeks passed, the reading lessons became a cherished part of their daily routine. Each evening, after the ranch work was done and dinner was finished, Jacob and Nora would sit together at the table, working through letters and sounds, then simple words, and eventually short sentences. Their relationship deepened during these quiet hours. As Nora struggled with particularly difficult words, Jacob would encourage her, his pride evident when she finally succeeded. As they worked, they talked about everything: their hopes and fears, their memories and dreams. Nora found herself falling for this patient, kind man who saw her struggle and chose to help rather than judge. One evening in late October, nearly 6 weeks after their wedding, Nora successfully read an entire paragraph from a simple primer without help. She looked up at Jacob with shining eyes. "I did it, you did," he said, his face beaming with pride. "Nora, that was wonderful." The joy of the moment overwhelmed her, and without thinking, she threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for believing I could do this." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I always believed in you," he said softly. When Nora pulled back slightly, she found herself looking directly into his eyes, their faces mere inches apart. The air between them seemed to shift, charged with something new and electric. Jacob's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in their depths. Nora answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepening as he responded. It was her first real kiss, and it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Jacob cupped her face gently in his hand. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," Nora whispered. "Nora, I know we married for practical reasons, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond that. I love you. I love your determination, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you laugh when the chickens chase George around the yard. I love watching you learn and grow. I love you." Tears filled Nora's eyes. "I love you too, Jacob. I think I started falling for you that first day when you said you would teach me to read. You could have sent me away, but instead you offered me hope." He kissed her again, longer this time, and when they finally broke apart, he took her hand. "Would you like to come to my room tonight? As my wife, truly?" Nora nodded, her heart full. Yes. That night marked a new beginning in their marriage. Jacob was gentle and patient, making sure Nora felt safe and cherished. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, she rested her head on his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" Jacob asked, his fingers running through her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Nora answered truthfully. The months that followed were among the best of Nora's life. As autumn turned to winter, she continued her reading lessons, progressing to longer texts, and even beginning to learn to write simple sentences. Jacob ordered books from town novels and poetry collections, telling her that soon she would be able to read anything she wanted. The ranch work continued through the cold months. Nora learned to help with the animals, becoming particularly fond of the horses. Jacob taught her to ride, and she discovered a natural aptitude for it. On clear winter days, they would ride out together to check on the cattle, racing across the frozen prairie with the wind in their faces. Mary became a close friend, visiting often and teaching Nora the finer points of ranch cooking and household management. Through Mary, Nora also learned the local gossip and news, feeling more connected to the wider community. In December, a harsh blizzard struck the area, trapping them all inside for 3 days. Nora spent the time reading aloud to Jacob from one of their books, stumbling over difficult words but persevering. He would listen with his eyes closed, a contented smile on his face, occasionally correcting her pronunciation but mostly just enjoying the sound of her voice. "You know what amazes me?" he said during one of these reading sessions. "What? 6 months ago, you could not read at all. Now here you are, reading me stories like you have been doing it all your life. You are remarkable, Nora." She set the book down and moved to sit beside him on the floor by the fire. "I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Jacob said firmly. "I just gave you the tools. You did the hard work. Never forget that." As winter began to give way to early spring, Nora started feeling unwell in the mornings. At first, she thought she had caught a cold, but when the symptoms persisted and she noticed other changes in her body, she sought out Mary's advice. Mary took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "My dear, I think you are expecting a baby." The news filled Nora with a mixture of joy and fear. She wanted children desperately, but the thought of childbirth terrified her. That evening she told Jacob over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He was silent for a moment, then stood and came around the table, pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Nora asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Jacob said, pulling back to look at her face. "Nora, you have given me so much already. A home that feels like a home, someone to share my life with, and now a child. I am the luckiest man in Iowa." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into summer. Nora continued her reading lessons, determined to be able to read to her child someday. She was now reading full novels, writing letters to Margaret in Pennsylvania, and even helping Jacob with some of the ranch paperwork. Her belly grew round, and Jacob became even more protective, insisting she rest more and take on fewer physical tasks. He would place his hand on her stomach in the evenings, marveling at the sensation of the baby moving beneath his palm. "What should we name him or her?" Nora asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "For a boy, I have always liked the name James after my father," Jacob said. "What about you?" "I like that," Nora said. "And if it is a girl, I would like to name her Sarah after my mother." "James or Sarah Thorne," Jacob said, trying out the names. "I like both." In early September, exactly 1 year after Nora had first arrived in Council Bluffs, her labor began. Mary came immediately, bringing experience and calm assurance. Jacob paced downstairs, worried sick, while Tom tried to distract him with talk of the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, but Nora drew on the strength she had built over the past year, the determination that had driven her to learn to read, to build a new life, to open her heart to love. When the baby finally arrived just after dawn, filling the house with lusty cries, Mary called Jacob upstairs. He entered the bedroom to find Nora exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "It is a boy," she said, smiling up at him through tears. "We have a son." Jacob approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peering out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would likely turn brown like his father's. "James," he whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fist closed around it immediately, gripping tight. "He is strong," Nora said proudly. "Like his mother," Jacob replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you, Nora. Thank you for everything." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Little James proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up at odd hours, but rewarded them with sweet smiles and gurgles. Jacob proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Nora for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending his free time simply holding his son and marveling at him. Nora discovered that motherhood suited her. She sang to James constantly, and as he grew older, she began reading to him from the children's books Jacob brought home from town. The act of reading to her son, something she had once thought impossible, filled her with profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. 2 years passed in a blur of growth and change. James grew from an infant to a toddler, taking his first steps on the porch of the ranch house and speaking his first words "Papa" and "Mama" in quick succession. The ranch prospered under Jacob's management, and they were able to hire 2 additional hands and expand their herd. Nora's reading and writing skills continued to improve until she was fully literate, able to handle all the household correspondence and even help Jacob with ranch records. She began teaching Mary, who had confessed that she too had limited reading skills, and the 2 women spent pleasant afternoons working through lessons while their children played nearby. Mary and Tom's youngest daughter had been born shortly after James. In the spring of 1876, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less fear and more excitement. James would be nearly 3 when the new baby arrived, the perfect age to be a big brother. "Another blessing," Jacob said when she told him, pulling her into his arms. "Our family is growing. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl this time?" Nora asked. "I do not care either way," Jacob said honestly. "As long as you and the baby are healthy, I will be happy." This pregnancy was easier than the first, and Nora remained active throughout, chasing after young James and managing the household. She had found her place on the ranch, earning the respect of the ranch hands and becoming an integral part of the operation. She could rope a calf if needed, help with foaling mares, and manage the accounts with ease. In December, during the first snowfall of the season, Nora went into labor. This time, the process was quicker, and by evening they welcomed a daughter into the world. Sarah Thorne had her mother's gray eyes and delicate features, and from the moment Jacob held her, he was utterly smitten. "She is perfect," he said, staring down at his daughter with wonder. "Nora, she looks just like you." "She has your nose," Nora said with a tired smile, watching her husband cradle their daughter with practiced ease. Young James, brought in to meet his sister, peered at her curiously. "Baby," he announced, poking gently at her tiny hand. "Yes, this is your sister, Sarah," Nora told him. "You have to be gentle with her." James nodded solemnly, already taking his role as big brother seriously. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house was fuller, louder, and messier, but also filled with more laughter and love than Nora had ever imagined possible. Jacob proved to be an excellent father to both children, somehow finding time despite his ranch responsibilities to play with James and rock Sarah to sleep. One evening in early spring, after both children were tucked into bed, Jacob and Nora sat together on the porch swing he had built the previous summer. The air was mild, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. "You remember this time 5 years ago?" Jacob asked, his arm around Nora's shoulders. "I was terrified," Nora admitted. "Traveling to marry a stranger, carrying a secret I was sure would ruin everything." "I was nervous too," Jacob confessed. "Worried that we would not suit, that you would be unhappy here, that I would not be the husband you needed." "And now?" Nora asked, though she knew the answer. "Now I cannot imagine my life any other way." He turned to look at her in the fading light. "You transformed this place, Nora." It was just a ranch before you came. You made it a home. You made me a better man." "You did that yourself," Nora said, echoing the words he had once spoken to her about learning to read. "I just loved you." "That was more than enough," Jacob said, kissing her softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Nora thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 5 years ago, convinced her inability to read made her less worthy of love and happiness. How wrong she had been. "Jacob," she said softly, "do you know what the best part is?" "What?" "Everything I have now, our children, this home, this life, it is all built on honesty. I told you my secret, the thing I was most ashamed of, and instead of rejecting me, you helped me. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. You taught me some things too," Jacob said. "You taught me that patience has its rewards, that love is not just something you feel but something you do every day. You taught me that a family is built, not born." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they talked about their dreams for the future. They wanted to expand the house, adding more rooms for the children and perhaps more children to come. Jacob wanted to start breeding horses as well as raising cattle, capitalizing on Nora's skill with the animals. Nora wanted to start a small school on the ranch, teaching the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families, sharing the gift of literacy that Jacob had given her. The years continued to unfold with their share of both challenges and joys. The ranch faced difficulties: drought years when the grass grew thin, harsh winters that tested their resolve, market fluctuations that affected cattle prices. But Jacob and Nora faced these challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. In 1878, they welcomed another son, whom they named Thomas after Tom, who had become like family. Young James, now 6, helped care for his younger siblings with growing confidence, and Sarah proved to be a bright, curious child who loved the stories her mother read to her each night. Nora did eventually start her school, first teaching just their own children and the children of the ranch hands, but eventually drawing students from neighboring ranches. She taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic in a small schoolroom Jacob built onto the side of the house. She never forgot the struggle of being unable to read, and she was especially patient with students who found learning difficult. Tom and Mary's family grew as well, and their children became playmates for the Thorne children. The two families celebrated holidays together, helped each other through hard times, and became as close as blood relations. One afternoon in the summer of 1881, Nora was working in the garden when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Looking up, she saw Jacob returning from town, and her heart still gave a little flutter at the sight of him, even after 9 years of marriage. He climbed down from the wagon with a package under his arm, a mysterious smile on his face. "What is that?" Nora asked, wiping dirt from her hands. "Something I ordered from back east," Jacob said. "Come inside, I want to show you." They went into the house, where Jacob carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a beautiful leather-bound book. The cover was embossed with gold lettering, and when Nora opened it, she found that it was blank inside a journal. "I thought you might like to write down our story," Jacob said. "Everything that has happened since you arrived here. You are such a wonderful writer now, and I think our children would like to know how we started." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "Jacob, this is beautiful." "There is something else," he said, turning to the first page. In his careful handwriting he had written, "To my beloved wife Nora. You came to me unable to read, and I had the privilege of teaching you. But you taught me so much more. You taught me about courage, about perseverance, about what it means to truly love someone. This is for your words, your memories, your story." May our children and grandchildren read it someday and know what an extraordinary woman you are. All my love, Jacob." Nora threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "I love you so much." "I love you too," he said, holding her close. "Always." That evening, after the children were in bed, Nora sat at the table with the journal open before her and a pen in her hand. She thought about where to begin, how to capture all that had happened, all that she felt. Finally, she began to write. "My name is Nora Thorne, and this is the story of how I found my home." It begins on a dusty September day in 1872, when I stepped off a stagecoach in Council Bluffs, Iowa, carrying a secret I was sure would ruin my life. As the years rolled on, the Thorne Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Jacob's dream of breeding horses came to fruition, and their horses became known throughout Iowa and beyond for their quality. The ranch employed a dozen men at its peak, and the sprawling house was expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing family. Nora and Jacob had 5 children in total: James, Sarah, Thomas, Emma, and finally young Jacob Jr., born in 1883. Each child was raised with an appreciation for hard work, education, and family. Each one learned to read almost as soon as they could speak, with Nora treasuring every moment she spent teaching them, remembering how different things might have been if she had never learned herself. James grew into a tall, serious young man who shared his father's love of ranching and his mother's way with horses. Sarah proved to be a natural teacher like her mother, eventually taking over much of the schoolroom work as she got older. Thomas was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into good-natured trouble. Emma was gentle and artistic, with a talent for drawing that amazed everyone. And little Jacob Jr., whom everyone called Junior, was a charming bundle of mischief who could talk his way out of almost any trouble. The Thorne family became pillars of their community. Jacob served on the county council, helping to make decisions that affected all the ranchers in the area. Nora's school grew into a proper one-room schoolhouse built on their property, serving dozens of children. Together, they helped build a church in the nearest town, only 8 miles away, making it easier for families to gather for worship. Mary and Tom remained their closest friends through all the years. Their children grew up alongside the Thorne children, creating bonds that would last lifetimes. The two families supported each other through every trial sickness, the occasional injury that came with ranch work, the loss of Tom and Mary's eldest son to pneumonia one terrible winter. Through it all, Nora continued to write in her journal, documenting not just the major events but the small, precious moments that made up a life. James's first day helping his father round up cattle, Sarah's delight at reading her first full book alone, Thomas building a treehouse with his father's help, Emma's first drawing that truly captured the likeness of their barn cat, Junior taking his first steps. One entry, written on their 15th wedding anniversary, read, "Today Jacob surprised me with a picnic by the creek, just the two of us. The children are old enough now to manage without us for an afternoon, and we took advantage of the freedom to steal away like young lovers. We sat by the water and talked about everything and nothing, and I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude for this life we have built together. 15 years ago, I could not read a single word. Now I write nearly every day. I teach children to read, and I have a family I adore." Jacob did more than teach me letters and sounds. He taught me that I was worthy of love, worthy of dreams coming true. I thank God every day for the courage I found to be honest with him, and for his grace in accepting me as I was. As their children grew into teenagers and young adults, the house remained full of life and activity. James began courting a young woman from a neighboring ranch, the daughter of another cattle rancher. Sarah proved to have no interest in marriage yet, more concerned with her teaching and her students. Thomas talked about joining the cavalry, much to his mother's worry and his father's hidden pride. Emma spent hours sketching and painting, creating beautiful artwork that decorated the walls of their home. In 1891, James married his sweetheart, Catherine, in a ceremony held on the ranch, with the whole community in attendance. Nora cried watching her eldest son exchange vows, remembering her own wedding day nearly 20 years earlier. Jacob squeezed her hand, understanding without words the emotions flowing through her. 2 years later, Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a young lawyer who came to town from Illinois. Michael was educated, thoughtful, and clearly adored Sarah. When he asked for her hand, Jacob gave his blessing, though both parents mourned the fact that Sarah would be moving to Illinois after the wedding. But life has a way of balancing these changes. James and Catherine's first child was born in 1894, a healthy boy they named Jacob after his grandfather. Watching Jacob hold his first grandchild, seeing the wonder and love on his face, Nora felt her heart might burst with happiness. "We are grandparents," Jacob said with amazement, carefully cradling the tiny baby. "How did we get old enough to be grandparents?" "We are not old," Nora protested with a laugh. "We are in our prime." And indeed, though both were now in their mid-40s, they remained active and vital. Jacob's hair had gone gray at the temples, and Nora had laugh lines around her eyes, but they were still the same people who had fallen in love over reading lessons at the dining table. Thomas did eventually join the cavalry, serving for 3 years before deciding that ranch life was what he truly wanted. He returned home with a new maturity and a determination to help expand the family business. Emma met a traveling photographer and discovered a passion for the new art form, eventually opening a small photography studio in Council Bluffs. Junior, true to form, proved to be the one most naturally gifted at ranching. Despite being the youngest, he had an instinct for cattle and horses that impressed even his father. He often talked about the future of the ranch, about new breeding techniques and business strategies, and Jacob listened with pride. In the late 1890s, as the century drew to a close, the Thorne Ranch was thriving like never before. The children, grown now and pursuing their own paths, still gathered for holidays and important occasions, filling the house with grandchildren and laughter. Nora's school had educated hundreds of children over the years, many of whom went on to achieve things their parents had never dreamed possible. One evening, as Nora and Jacob sat on their porch, now a familiar ritual performed thousands of times over the decades, they reflected on the approaching new century. "Can you believe it will soon be 1900? Nora asked, leaning against Jacob's shoulder. "A whole new century." "Makes a man feel old," Jacob admitted, "but also grateful. We have seen so much, built so much." "Do you ever regret it?" Nora asked. "Placing that advertisement, taking a chance on a mail-order bride." Jacob turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Never, not for one single second." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Nora. Everything good in my life came from you." "We built it together," Nora said, as she always did when he praised her. "Yes," Jacob agreed. "Together, the way it should be." As the new century dawned, the Thornes faced it with optimism and hope. By then, they had 7 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch spanned thousands of acres, and the Thorne name was respected throughout Iowa and beyond. Nora's journal had been filled and replaced several times over, creating a detailed record of their life together. When they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children organized a massive party at the ranch. Over 100 people attended, including neighbors, former students, business associates, and friends accumulated over 3 decades. There were speeches and toasts, food and music, and an overwhelming outpouring of love and respect for the couple who had built such a remarkable life together. During the celebration, Sarah presented her parents with a gift, a professionally bound book. Inside were Nora's journals, which Sarah had secretly borrowed and had printed and bound properly. The title page read, "From Illiteracy to Legacy, the story of Jacob and Nora Thorne." "I thought it was time your story was preserved properly," Sarah explained as her parents stared at the book in wonder. "You always taught us that education was the key to opportunity, that learning could transform a life. Your story proves that. It should be shared." Nora held the book against her chest, tears streaming down her face. From a woman who once could not read a single word to someone whose written words were now printed in a book, the journey was almost too extraordinary to believe. "Thank you," she whispered to Sarah, then looked around at all her children and grandchildren gathered near. "Thank you all. You are our greatest legacy." Jacob, standing beside his wife with his arm around her waist, spoke to the assembled crowd. 30 years ago, I was a lonely rancher who took a chance on a mail-order bride. I got letters from a woman who seemed thoughtful and kind, and I hoped we might make a decent life together. What I could never have imagined was this." He gestured around at the crowd, the thriving ranch, their large and loving family. "Nora came here carrying a secret she thought would ruin everything. Instead, that secret became the foundation of our partnership. When she confessed she could not read, I said I would teach her. And she did learn, better than I ever could have imagined. But more importantly, we learned together how to build a life, how to love, how to create something lasting and good. That is what real partnership looks like." The party continued long into the evening, but eventually the crowd dispersed, and Nora and Jacob found themselves alone on their porch once more, the familiar position they had occupied thousands of times over the years. 30 years, Nora said softly. "It has gone so fast." "And we still have many more ahead of us," Jacob said with confidence. "We are not done yet." He was right. Though they were in their 50s now, they remained active and engaged in the ranch and their community. Jacob still rode out with the men, though perhaps not as frequently as before. Nora still taught a few students, though she had long since turned over most of the schoolwork to younger teachers. Their love, far from diminishing with time, had only deepened. They had grown together, adapted together, weathered storms together. They knew each other's thoughts, could communicate with a glance, and still found joy in each other's company. In 1905, Junior announced his engagement to a smart, capable young woman named Alice, who had grown up on a neighboring ranch. The wedding was scheduled for the spring of 1906, and preparations began immediately. This would be the last of their children to marry, and both Nora and Jacob felt the bittersweetness of that milestone. The wedding was beautiful, held on a perfect May day with wildflowers blooming across the prairie. Junior and Alice exchanged vows under an arch that Jacob and his sons had built together, and Nora thought about all the weddings they had witnessed over the years, their children's, ranch hands, neighbors. Each one was special, but this one felt like the closing of a particular chapter. That night, after the celebration ended and the guests had departed, Nora and Jacob walked out to the small family cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. They had buried Jacob's parents there, as well as a stillborn daughter who had come between Thomas and Emma, and several beloved ranch dogs over the years. It was a peaceful place, marked by a simple wooden fence and a large oak tree that Jacob's father had planted decades ago. "We should pick out our spots," Jacob said, only half joking. Not for many years yet, Nora said firmly. We have grandchildren to watch grow up and probably great-grandchildren coming soon. I hope so, Jacob said. I want to see as much of the future as possible. They stood together in the fading light, looking out over the ranch they had built together. The house lights glowed warm in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and they could hear the sounds of cattle and horses settling down for the night. It was a peaceful, prosperous scene, the fruit of decades of hard work and love. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Nora asked. "When you picked me up from the stage?" "Often," Jacob admitted. "I remember being nervous, hoping you would like the ranch, hoping we would suit each other. I remember thinking you were pretty but looked frightened." "I was terrified," Nora said with a laugh. "But you were kind. You were patient. You gave me a chance to settle in before the wedding." "Best decision I ever made," Jacob said, "giving us time to know each other. By the time we married, I already knew I was making the right choice. Even after I told you I could not read, especially after you told me that," Jacob said firmly. "That took courage, Nora. That took trust. And it showed me who you really were, someone brave enough to be honest even when it was hard. That is when I knew for certain we would make it." They walked slowly back to the house, their steps matched after years of walking together. Inside, they could hear Alice and Junior cleaning up from the wedding, laughing together. The sound made them both smile. "Our family is in good hands," Jacob observed. "Junior and Alice will take care of this place when we are gone. They will love it like we have." "Not for a long time yet," Nora repeated, squeezing his hand. The years that followed were good ones. More grandchildren arrived and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of Jacob and Junior working together. Nora's health remained strong, and she continued to be active in the community, though she finally retired from teaching in 1910, at the age of 60. Jacob's health was not quite as robust. Years of hard physical labor had taken their toll on his body. His joints ached in cold weather, and he moved more slowly than before. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for his family never wavered. In the fall of 1912, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. The celebration was smaller than the 30th, just family this time, but no less meaningful. They had 14 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren by then, and having them all gathered in the house that Jacob's father had built so long ago felt like the greatest blessing imaginable. During the family dinner, James stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "You gave us the greatest gift children can receive. You showed us what true love looks like. You showed us that partnership means working together, that family means being there for each other, and that a life well lived is one filled with purpose and love. Thank you for everything you have given us, everything you have taught us. We love you." There was not a dry eye in the room as everyone raised their glasses and echoed, "We love you." That night, lying in bed together, the same bed they had shared for 4 decades, Nora and Jacob talked quietly about the celebration. "We did well, did we not?" Jacob asked. "We did very well," Nora agreed. "Our children are good people making their own good lives. We should be proud." "I am," Jacob said. "And I am grateful. 40 years with you, Nora. 40 years of laughter and love, of challenges overcome and dreams realized. I would not change a single day." "Not even the hard days?" Nora asked with a slight smile. "Especially not the hard days," Jacob said. "Those are the ones that taught us what we were capable of, the ones that brought us closer together." In the winter of 1914, Jacob caught a bad cold that settled in his lungs. Despite Nora's careful nursing and the doctor's best efforts, the infection proved too much for his 70-year-old body. On a quiet January evening, surrounded by his family, Jacob Thorne passed away peacefully in his sleep. The grief nearly broke Nora. After more than 40 years together, the loss of her husband felt like losing half of herself. She wandered through the house they had shared, touching his things, remembering their life together. The ranch hand spoke in hushed tones, uncertain how to comfort the woman who had been such a strong presence in their lives. But Nora was not alone. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, providing support and love. Junior and Alice insisted she stay in the main house, that it would always be her home. Sarah came from Illinois and stayed for 2 months, helping her mother through the worst of the grief. One evening, Sarah found Nora in the study that Jacob had used as his office, staring at the bookshelves filled with the books they had read together over the years. "Mama," Sarah said gently, "are you all right?" "I was just remembering," Nora said, her voice thick with tears. "When I first came here, I could not read a single one of these books. Your father taught me. He was so patient, so kind. He never made me feel stupid or ashamed. He just believed I could learn, and that belief gave me the courage to try." "He loved you so much," Sarah said, moving to embrace her mother. "I know," Nora whispered, "and I loved him. I still do. I always will. Mama, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What was the most important thing Daddy taught you? Beyond reading, I mean." Nora thought for a long moment. "He taught me that I was worthy. Worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of dreams and hopes and a good life. I came here thinking my inability to read made me less than others, made me somehow deficient. Your father showed me that everyone has struggles, everyone has things they need help with, and that needing help does not make you weak, it makes you human. That lesson changed everything for me." Sarah hugged her mother tighter. "You gave him a lot too, Mama. You transformed his life just as much as he transformed yours." "I hope so," Nora said. "I hope I made him as happy as he made me." "You did," Sarah assured her. "Anyone who ever saw you together knew it. You were a true partnership." As the months passed, Nora slowly found her way through the grief. She remained on the ranch, finding comfort in the familiar routines and the presence of family. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive. She also returned to her journals, writing down all the memories she had not yet recorded, all the moments she wanted to preserve. She wrote about their last years together, about the love that had sustained them through 4 decades, about the lessons learned and the life they had built. One afternoon in the spring of 1915, while Nora was working in the garden, something she had always loved, she had a visitor. A young woman, perhaps 25 years old, approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Thorne?" the woman asked. "Yes." Nora stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "My name is Rachel Miller. I hope you do not mind my coming here unannounced. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "You taught me to read," Rachel explained. "I was one of your students years ago. I was 11 when I came to your school, and I was so far behind the other children. My parents never had time to teach me, and I felt so stupid. But you were patient with me, just like you were with all of us. You never made me feel bad for not knowing. You just helped me learn." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "I remember you. You were a hard worker, always trying your best." "Because you believed I could do it," Rachel said. "Mrs. Thorne, I went on to become a teacher myself, partly because of you. I wanted to help other children the way you helped me. I have a school now, over in the next county, and I try to teach the way you did, with patience and kindness and belief in every student." "That is wonderful," Nora said, genuinely moved. "I heard about your husband's passing," Rachel continued. "I am so sorry. But I wanted you to know that what you and Mr. Thorne did here, the school you built, the children you taught, it mattered. It changed lives. You changed mine." After Rachel left, Nora sat on the porch steps and cried. They were not tears of grief this time, but tears of gratitude and recognition. She and Jacob had built something that extended far beyond their ranch, far beyond their own family. They had touched lives, made a difference, left a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. That evening, she wrote in her journal, "Today I was reminded that the work Jacob and I did together has ripples we will never fully know. The school, the students, the lives touched by our simple decision to share the gift of literacy, it all matters. Jacob, wherever you are, I hope you know what we accomplished. I hope you know that the love we shared changed not just our lives, but the lives of countless others. I miss you every moment of every day, but I am grateful beyond measure for the time we had together." Nora lived for another 12 years, passing away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1927 at the age of 77. She was surrounded by family to the end, her mind sharp and her spirit strong. She was buried on the hill beside Jacob, beneath the oak tree that had sheltered so many family moments over the years. The ranch continued under Junior's management, and then under his children, passing through generations of Thornes who all knew the story of how it began with a mail-order bride who could not read and a rancher who offered to teach her. Nora's journals, bound and preserved, became family treasures. Each generation read them, learning about the courage it took to admit weakness, the grace it took to offer help, and the love that could grow when two people committed to building a life together. In those pages, descendants found not just a family history but a testament to the transformative power of love and education. They read about early reading lessons at the dining table, about building a family and a ranch, about facing challenges together and celebrating triumphs side by side. One passage, written on their 25th anniversary, was particularly beloved by the family. It read, "Today marks 25 years since I stepped off that stagecoach, terrified and alone, carrying a secret I thought would doom me to a life of loneliness. Instead, I found Jacob, who saw my weakness not as a flaw but as an opportunity to help. He taught me to read, but more importantly, he taught me to believe in myself. He showed me that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance, not about never needing help, but about being brave enough to ask for it. Our life together has been the greatest adventure I could have imagined." From those first halting lessons with the alphabet to running a school that has taught hundreds of children, from our wedding day to watching our children build families of their own, every moment has been precious. Jacob, my love, my partner, my teacher, thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, all those years ago. Thank you for saying then, "I will teach you," when I confessed my secret. Those 5 words changed my life, and I will spend the rest of my days grateful for them. The story of Jacob and Nora Thorne became a legend in Council Bluffs and the surrounding counties. People spoke of them as an example of what partnership should look like, of what could be accomplished when two people committed to supporting each other. The school that Nora founded continued operating for decades, eventually becoming part of the county school system, but always remembering its roots in one woman's determination to learn and one man's commitment to teach. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled: the importance of education, the value of hard work, the power of love and commitment. The Thorne name became synonymous with integrity and community service, and many descendants went on to become teachers, inspired by Nora's example. Years later, when Interstate 80 was built through Iowa, it passed not far from what had been Thorne Ranch. By then, the original house was gone, replaced by more modern structures, but a historical marker was erected near the site. It read, "Near this location stood Thorne Ranch, established 1857. Home of Jacob and Nora Thorne, who built one of the most successful cattle and horse operations in Iowa in the late 19th century. Nora Thorne, who came to Council Bluffs as a mail-order bride in 1872, founded a school that educated hundreds of children over 4 decades. Her commitment to literacy and education transformed the community. The Thorne legacy of service, education, and family continues to influence the region today. But the true legacy was not in markers or records. It was in the countless lives touched by their story, in the marriages strengthened by their example, in the students who learned that it was never too late to acquire new skills, in the families who discovered that love and partnership could overcome any obstacle. The story of a young woman who could not read, and a kind man who offered to teach her, became more than just one couple's history. It became a reminder that transformation is always possible, that vulnerability can be strength, and that the most profound changes often come from the simplest acts of kindness. In the end, what Jacob and Nora built together was more than a successful ranch or a large family. They built a legacy of love, learning, and partnership that would echo through generations. They proved that it did not matter where you started. What mattered was having the courage to admit your struggles, the grace to accept help, and the commitment to build something lasting together. Their story demonstrated that real love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up every day, about teaching and learning together, about believing in each other even when times were hard. It was about transforming a business arrangement into a true partnership, about building a family from intention and commitment, about creating a home where everyone was valued and supported. And it all began with 5 simple words spoken on a September evening in 1872, words that changed 2 lives and created a ripple effect that would last for generations. "Then I will teach you." Those words represented more than just an offer to teach reading. They represented acceptance, support, partnership, and love. They represented the beginning of something extraordinary, built from an honest confession and a generous response. They represented the foundation of a legacy that would endure long after both Jacob and Nora had passed from this world. In the quiet moments on porches and in kitchens throughout the region, their story was still told. Parents shared it with children, teachers with students, partners with each other. It became a touchstone, a reminder of what was possible when 2 people committed to building a life together based on honesty, respect, and love. The mail-order bride who confessed she could not read, and the rancher who said he would teach her, became more than just historical figures. They became symbols of hope, of transformation, of the power of love to change lives. Their story proved that everyone deserves a second chance, that learning is a lifelong journey, and that the greatest adventures often begin with a leap of faith. And so their legacy lived on, not in monuments or buildings, but in hearts and minds, in the lives they touched, and the example they set. Jacob and Nora Thorne, who started with so little and built so much, who loved so deeply and gave so generously, who taught not just literacy but life's most important lessons, continued to inspire long after they were gone. Their story was proof that love could conquer fear, that partnership could overcome any obstacle, and that a life built on honesty and mutual support could create something truly extraordinary. It was a story of transformation and triumph, of taking a risk and reaping rewards beyond imagination, of finding home in the most unexpected place. From that dusty September day in 1872, when Nora Langley stepped off the stagecoach in Council Bluffs, Iowa, to the quiet spring evening in 1927, when she drew her last breath surrounded by the family she and Jacob had created. Their story was one of love's enduring power, It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. And it all began with a confession, an offer, and 5 simple words that changed everything. "Then I will teach you,"